From the nearly 3 years on this channel where I've been playing games for retro review, one thing has remained clear. That handheld gaming has a lot more going for it than console gaming. On the consoles, whichever one you may play, everything's played out. All the big name titles are covered by every media outlet and gaming blog known to man, so you know what you're absolutely getting into. But conversely, handhelds do not receive the same treatment, especially now, when the Vita has been completely given up by Sony, and now only remains afloat thanks to the generosity of third-party developers, and Nintendo's fantastically successful 3DS, which gets little advertisement because Nintendo has no idea what it's doing, so you can get actually surprised by the quality of games out there when you pick one up and start riffling through libraries. Of course, that isn't a guarantee, as the first Vita game that I played for this channel was the spectacular abomination Call of Duty Black Ops Declassified. Don't even frickin' remind me about that. And today brings us to Mario Pinball Land, and I know, it seems a bit off for this channel on the name alone, but trust me, this thing has an intact story mode and pretty much nothing else to offer. Yeah, it's a pinball game that has no free play / pinball mode is a bit of a kooky sell. I know that I joked a while ago that Nintendo was at a point with the Mario franchise that any idiot with even half a baked idea could get a license from those big boys. But this one seems even more strange since Miyamoto and Iwata were credited on the production itself. And man, was that a horrible lapse in judgment. To Fuse Games and Nintendo's credit, Mario Pinball Land is one of the most graphically powerful games released for the Game Boy Advance, right before the DS was put into the market, reaching near GameCube status, with the character designs and art direction being bright and vibrant as any of its console cousins, and it's one of the game's heaviest redeeming factors. However, I choose to believe that the graphics capabilities of Mario Pinball Land was only achieved due to the cartridge space being carved to pieces in order to make it fit, because boy does this one define threadbare. As with every other Mario game, the point of Pinball Land is to collect stars and coins in order to create a Scrooge McDuckian gold pile for Mario to relax on top of, and in Super Mario 64 that introduced the idea of the Power Star as a source of magical power that Bowser uses in order to create diabolical traps and worlds to kill Mario. In this game, however, the term is so loosely adapted that Fuse decided to add Power Star keys to the mix that don't count as Power Stars, and there is literally no reason why the Power Stars would be here at this carnival since they aren't doing anything. The worlds that the stars are trapped in weren't created by Bowser, they just happened to be there at the time, and whatever Bowser is doing at the Mushroom Kingdom Carnival seems to be equally nonsense. Bowser and his goons just happen to show up to the happy-go-lucky affair. No one tries to stop them, despite Bowser sending only 2 Goombas to kidnap Princess Peach, which they decide to do by launching her from the cannon she happened to be getting into at that exact moment, literally into Bowser's castle, which coincidentally was built 3 miles from the carnival grounds. So, how the fuck does any of that make sense? And then the Koopa Troop just mill around holding the Power Stars that are keys to getting into Bowser's castle, even though he's already captured the princess. Yeah, the plot hole was in Super Mario 64 too, but that game gets a pass because it's fucking awesome. Here, it's completely bewildering. Who the hell was on the writing team for this? Who designed this whole freaking cutscene and didn't laugh out loud at how stupid it is? Seriously. Mario Pinball Land is simply an awkward version of that same idea. Collect Power Stars by beating up Koopa Troop enemies around the world, and this would be all fine and dandy if we weren't playing a pinball game as promised by the title. See, I don't know if that you remember this, Fuse Games, but the fun of pinball is competing with the board itself in order to rack up points, which can generally be done just as long as you keep the ball in the air. But in Mario Pinball Land, where the aim of the game is to precisely complete challenges, the fun of Chaos Theory is directly fighting the fun the game is trying to make. The giant issue of this GBA exclusive is that it's simply dead on arrival, frustrating levels to play, let alone complete, which you thankfully don't have to do since the final boss and ending is unlocked when you get 15 of the game's 35 stars. There are too many precise targets and too many chances for Mario to fall down boards for any period of time, with game being seen as a brutal punch to the face. I don't want to get too angry at Fuse games themselves, because it seems like they were working with a concept that is nearly impossible to make actually work. Perhaps with a Telltale style narrative journey with some larger pinball boards, yet I digress. I mean, I'm sure it can work somehow, but that's another problem for another day. Throughout the game, you'll be asked to hit specific targets with the Mario Ball, defeat a set of enemies, or complete target challenges where you have to hit an object a specific way in order to trigger an event, and even a couple of mini games, all of which are excruciating to complete. The game even has a handful of boss battles in the game, unbelievably, which basically boil down to hit the thing in a certain way, except for a couple who had even more moronic hurdles between you and success, where your chances of falling off the board to create the rigmarole journey of getting back to the boss fight once again skyrocket into the freaking space. The loser is obviously the final Bowser battle, which is a two-parter marathon boss fight with a board filled with useless junk and tiny flipper windows. And while it was frustrating enough gathering the 15 stars in the first place to even get to Bowser, you can at least rest easy that you'll probably have spent less than 2 hours in the game trying and failing repeatedly to do that. Yep, just like Super Mario Land, this game is unforgivingly short on content, to the point that I truly wonder how much paperwork on this game was completely ignored by Nintendo as it was on its way to be published. It could be likely, since Fuse Games is a very particular company only dealing in the development of pinball video games, and yeah, they probably should have known better if that was the case. After playing this game and seeing the appropriate ending of massive disappointment where Bowser is flung into a mountain and we don't even get to see Mario rescuing his princess, I suppose unless you went out of your way to get the full 5 hours of content on this game or snapped it in half and just watched it on YouTube out of revenge, I realized that Mario Pinball Land was actually a game whose only fault was that it was horridly ahead of its own time. Now, think about this with me. If Mario Pinball Land was released as a mobile game under Nintendo's expansion into phone gaming, this thing could have seen some moderate success instead of the "it looks nice but smells like garbage" reviews it actually received, since this would be the perfect game for that market. It has a shockingly low amount of content, it's pick up and play friendly, and would easily adapt itself for touchscreen controls. And of course, you could put extra lives and items in as microtransactions on top of it being a paid app. However, with that tiny song of praise, we have to come down and remember that the game was released in 2004 for the Game Boy Advance gaming device, and therefore there is zero excuse for a game to be this devoid of content for the sake of graphics, especially since it was overseen by Nintendo's top brass. Sure, it looks amazing for a GBA game hitting console level graphics, but it ends up creating a desire to snap the cartridge in half by the 5-minute mark, between requiring precise targeting in every single thing that Mario has to do to continue this nonsense quest of collecting power stars, and the inherent chaos theory of a pinball game that it can only be looked back upon as a failed concept that tried too hard at the wrong priority of development that ultimately created an infuriating mess for a video game whose destiny was a perpetual bargain bin. And even then it'd be too expensive for a game that can hit the credits within 100 minutes of playtime. And with that unfortunate final look at Mario's GBA days, next week we'll be looking at another of Mario's handheld glory days, and you'll just have to stay tuned to figure out which DS game I'm actually talking about. Until then, I'll end this video with a final scoreboard. And a well-deserved victory for gamers, because you guys just rock. See you next time.